This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit per second network connections, Intel E5 processors, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your servers on. It deploys Linux in seconds from a Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distribution and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, plumbing, scaling, and everything else you would want. So get the most out of your Linux node by checking them out at linode.com or devchat.tv/linode. Hello and welcome to episode 80 of React Native Radio. I'm your host, Nader Dabbit. Today on our panel, we have Gant Laborde.
Welcome, friends.
Peter Pikarczyk.
Good morning, everybody.
And today our special guest is Florian Rival, calling in from Paris, France. Welcome to the show, Florian.
Hi, everyone.
So today our topic is going to be about building native modules with React Native. I believe we've maybe talked about this, one or two times briefly. We may have even covered it a while back, but it's definitely been a while. And I think it's a really, important part of the React Native ecosystem and being a React Native developer. So we're going to dive pretty deep into it today with Florian. So Florian, before we kind of get into the topic, can you give us a brief introduction of what you do and kind of where you work right now?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm a software developer. I'm working right now in Paris. We are a dev shop specialized in creating React Native application. So it's called BAME. And we are about 40 people right now. So since we've started working with React Native, I've been creating a few native modules when it was necessary. And so that's why I'm quite interested in this topic. And apart from this, I'm also the author of a software that allows anyone to create video games. And it's cross-platform, and it's both native and built on native technologies and on JavaScript. So again, I'm really the kind of guy who is interested in doing cross-platform applications.
So I guess the first question that we can kind of jump into is what is exactly a native module, and how would you kind of describe that in terms of in the React Native ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So the thing is that when you take a React Native application, you have a skeleton of your app that is composed of the JavaScript source code. And the rest is, you can see it in the Android and iOS folders. These are the native apps containing the React Native source code and the source code of all the native dependencies and libraries that you're using. So you can see it by yourself by just opening Xcode or Android Studio. And from time to time, you can have a use case where you have to launch a native features like camera or anything that could be related to the capacity, to the features of your device. So in this case, most of the time, you can already use native modules that are available in React Native. But that's not always the case. And for example, there is, if you want to resize images, to send them, for example, on a server after taking a photo, there is no way to do it using React Native only. So we created at BAME a module to resize the images directly on your phone before uploading them to a server. So that's the use case for creating a native module. And in this case, you have to dig a bit into the native programming by doing either Objective-C for iOS or Java for Android. And the thing is, it's quite easy, but we can talk a bit later about how to create these native packages.
So when you use a native module with React Native, is that something that every React Native app just kind of bundles in the same way? Do you have to worry about when React Native releases a new version to upgrade your native code, or most of the time does that all just work together?
Most of the time there are no breaking changes, but it can happen. And in fact, a few months ago, there was a few changes in the way you include files headers from the Objective-C part of React Native. So in this case, you had to update your native code, but it's quite stable. Since we started creating the native module for the image resizer, we made a bunch of fixes, like maybe 5 or 6, to adapt to the new version of React Native, and we started it like 2 years ago. So I would describe it as pretty stable, but you just have to be sure every time you're upgrading React Native to be sure that there was no broken changes, or if it's the case, to adapt your code. And a nice thing is that creating a native module is something that is quite nice, but you're not forced to do it at first when you want to dig a bit into native. You can just follow the documentation for React Native and start writing native code directly in your application without bothering creating a package. So that would be my first advice for anyone who wants to create or to access to a native feature.
Cool. Hey, I've got one more. Do you mind if I just sneak it in here?
Have at it, man.
Oh, cool. So the one thing that always kind of was complex for me was deciding whether I want to keep my pod files within the native project, or just creating a pod file and then pulling in for everybody. In your expertise, what do you recommend?
I think that the best practice is to version and to commit every pod associated with your application. So we are doing so when we are creating our application and committing everything. But I guess that if you think that the pods that you are using are quite stable, you just can keep a pod file and don't commit everything. That's up to you, I guess.
One of the most interesting things is seeing how people react to when changes come down. I think it was 47 or something like that, where you had to update Android dependencies for native, every so often something comes down the chain. Do you have what kind of system do you have in place for detecting if a break is coming in from Facebook? Do you have any kind of CI, a build off of Facebook's master? Or what most people I see do is wait until somebody files an issue and then just go ahead and figure out what went wrong and fix it by then.
Yeah, that's the main pain point, I think, for open sources maintainers for native modules. And that's a bit the way I'm working right now, because sometimes I'm aware of the changes that are coming because I'm just following guys on Twitter who are releasing the new version of React Native, or just reading the new breaking changes. But sometimes I get new pull requests to fix the compatibility with latest version. So in 47, if I'm not mistaken, there was a change in some Android method is not required anymore. So you have to remove an override annotation to make sure that it's compiling. So I think that there is no good way of doing these checks before a React Native version is released. So it's a bit of a pain point, and I guess that we could improve it by having some kind of channel, or maybe just a gist that is updated with the upgrade to do in your native module every time a new version is coming, or that could be announced maybe 1 month before a new version. I don't have a good solution for now.
Well, if you ever do find a good solution, please share it, because
Sure.
I think everybody suffers the same exact part with the native modules. And I think, it's something that we all have to figure out together.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that we already figured out how to improve the way we are doing React Native upgrade for applications. And now it's time for native module to see how we can avoid having, in your README, different parts for every version of React Native. So it's hard to keep the compatibility. I hope that now that React Native is released every month, we will be able to see how to improve this.
So when you're first starting to write a library, do you think somebody needs a lot of Objective-C and Java experience, or is it something that you can pick up pretty quickly?
I guess that the good side of working with React Native is that you don't have to be a native mobile developer before starting creating a real application, and you can you can improve your skills by working on native libraries and on native code during the time you're creating your application. So I guess you can really improve your level in native by just working on something that you need. And I would recommend to check the source code of a few React Native modules to see how it's done and if there is any good practice to follow. I guess that it's pretty easy to get started with real simple functions to just expose. For example, if you have to integrate a SDK, a third-party SDK, or I don't know, doing analytics or user tracking, and in this case, these SDKs are most of the time pretty simple. You just have a few functions to launch at the beginning of the application or when the user is doing an action. So in this case, I would recommend just following the React Native documentation about native module and start by exposing a few functions. That's quite simple, and you don't need advanced knowledge about Objective-C or Java. And then you can improve and see how you can expose more than a few functions. Learning Objective-C from zero to being an expert is not required at all.
Now, React Native has been around for some time. Are there modules that you believe are still sort of missing in the ecosystem?
That's a good question. Concerning is it still a need to create new native modules? I think that most of the native features that you want to access are now available either directly in React Native or using existing native modules, but you still can have to use a bit of native programming if you want to access to, for example, a third-party SDK for analytics or user tracking. And in this case, you can have to create your own native modules. And for example, there is a push notification service called batch.com. It's a bit like one signal. And in this case, there aren't any React Native module created for it. So what we've done a few days ago, a fellow coworker of mine has been creating a native module to access to the push notifications from this service. And it's now available, so you can use it, but it's still not complete, and we still need people to help us to create native modules for these third-party SDKs. And another thing is that I think that it would be great if we have a solution or maybe a tooling or something to help native developers to create React Native bindings from the very beginning. And for example, Airbnb has been doing this for their Lottie animation library. So it's available on iOS and Android, and they created React Native bindings from day zero. So that's really nice, and that's because they are using React Native. But maybe we can help iOS or Android developers to create React Native bindings, and in this case, React Native will be a first-class citizen for any developers on mobile phones. So that would be really great.
So what are some things that you look forward to in like the native module space?
So as I said, I think that a way to ease the binding of existing library will be really great to allow more native library to be ported to React Native. And there are things existing for example, for Node.js, it's called nbind. And it takes your native library written in C++ and allow you to create the bindings for Node.js and also for JavaScript using mscripton or and even for WebAssembly. So I guess we could have something that is that you can drop into your native library and that you can use to expose it to React Native. And so that would help to make React Native even better for doing any kind of application without worrying if you can use a specific feature or not. And yeah, I wish there was a way to know about new breaking changes for native modules in the new React Native versions. But as discussed, for now I don't have a good solution, and there are still a few innovation in this field. Yesterday I've seen a tweet from Leland Richardson, who is working at Airbnb, about something that he is making that automatically it's a prototype, but it creates a React Native, Swift, and Java native module from a TypeScript interface. And that's the kind of tooling I was talking about, using this tool to ease the process. I think we can have quality native modules that are created easier and easily and quicker than that's what we are doing now. And yeah, I really look forward to this kind of new tooling.
That actually brings up something interesting. That's using TypeScript. And it's really fun to hear Leland Richardson in a French accent, by the way. But probably you pronounce it correctly. I was wondering, what do you use at BAM? Is it TypeScript, Reason, Flow? Like, what exactly is sort of your, or just live free with like sort of the type specifications to make sure that you're not shipping a breaking product?
We're using Flow. We are, by the way, trying to see how we can have Flow at a good coverage for all of our apps, and that's not so easy. But I think we're getting better at it now. And so we do have a generator to bootstrap our applications, and it's part of this generator. So it's really there is no cost for us now to create an application with Flow, and it's still a lot of work for new developers to get used to Flow typing. I guess that by helping and maybe contributing to the documentation of Flow, we can help new developers to get used to Flow. And we've not tried TypeScript, so no idea about it. But maybe I'm not sure how it's working with React Native. But if it can help to have a good type coverage, it would allow to reduce bugs in our application. And because when you're coming back from a native background and you have to work with JavaScript and having errors due to a few silly mistakes that could have been catch by a type safety system, it's a bit a pity. So let's see how Flow can be used in our application. And I think that the type inference could even be better because as we have been using Flow for a while, we've discovered that it's a lot of work to do to have a good coverage. So maybe in a few times the type inference will be improved, and in this case there will be less typing to do to get your type right. And but that's something that is a bit related to native modules, because on the side you have JavaScript, right, which does not have a lot of type safety, and on the other part you have native programming language that are strongly typed. So I think that we can, and we'll see how the programming language are evolving. And maybe we can have a good balance between type safety that is too strong on the native part and that sometimes is slowing you down, and on the other side to have still a type safety programming language that is that allow you to create your application with zero runtime bugs. And I've not tried languages like Helm, which is our reason, but I look forward to. But for now, it's too much of a big step to do to convert everything that we have, or even to convert our own developers to this new language. But we'll see now that Reason 3 is available.
Yeah, it's a good call. I think that JavaScript, for some reason or another, just lends itself towards type mistakes over and over again. Can't figure out why, but it's good that there's so many solutions out there. And you know, Flow, I feel like Flow and TypeScript, you know, it's really nice because it doesn't have as big of a learning curve on there, unless you're crazy like Peter here, who's ready to jump in with Reason, both feet.
I love Reason.
So, like, if someone wants to build a native module, like, what would be the easiest direction for them to kind of go? Would it be to download an existing module or look at an existing module to get some idea of the boilerplate, or would it be to use a generator? I know you mentioned that Airbnb is coming out with something soon, or the people from there are, and I saw that tweet too. That looked pretty interesting. But yeah, I guess if someone wants to kind of just learn and start getting their feet wet here, because it's definitely an important part of being a React Native developer. I guess I would say it's like the next step to becoming like, you know, an expert, I guess you would say. So what would be the best direction for them to go?
I guess the first step is to read, in fact, the documentation from React Native. And there is a page about React Native modules for Android and for iOS. And it's pretty well explained. In my talk about native modules, that there was a slide just telling to read the documentation because it's quite well explained. And I think that the second step is just to open Xcode and Android Studio and to browse a bit to see how the bootstrapping is done and to see that it's not so complicated, in fact. And then if you want to create a library, there are a few command line tools that allow you to create a native module from scratch. In fact, we made the one at BAME, but it was maybe a few months or maybe 1 year ago, so it's not up to date. But there are others like React Native Create Library, and the other one is React Native Create Bridge. I'm not sure which one is the most up to date. Both are fine, and one is even allowing you to create library in Swift and Kotlin. Kotlin, I've never tried, but it looks very nice. You know, it's an alternative to Java. Yeah, I would recommend to start by adding what you need directly in your application, because that's the easiest to get started. And this way you can really create value for your customer before doing any open source work. And then you can use one of these command line tools to bootstrap an empty native module, and then just copy, paste, and port what you've done in your application to a native module. And then you can just throw up everything you've done in your application and replace it by your module. So yeah, most of the time when you create a native library, you've already experimented it in your own application. And the difference is that when you make a module, you have to install it in your application, and then to just put it on NPM and tell the community about it.
Yeah, we actually, one of the speakers who was hanging out at React Native EU, I call him Frostney all the time simply because his real name is Johannes or Johannes, and I am terrible at saying his real name. So, but yeah, he's the one who created React Native Create Library. And that I've used that one before. It's really, really good. I believe it even supports Windows, but the version of Windows it uses. So if you're going to create iOS, Android, and Windows, I think the Windows one needs to be updated a little bit, but it's a great kickoff point.
Yes. That's Johannes Stein, and he's a kind of fun guy too. So if you see him, tell him hello for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll call him Frostney because I'll still mess up his name.
Yeah, that is easier too.
Because there's a lot of really good stuff that comes out of your company, and I don't think enough people know that. I've read several of the articles.
Yeah, sure. So at BAME, what we're doing is, as I said, we are developing React Native application for our clients. And we are also trying to contribute to the community by either creating native modules, for example, React Native image resizer, or doing command line tools. For example, we have a generator to bootstrap an application. And we are also trying to talk at conferences or to have, we have a blog with a lot of articles about React Native. And the thing is that at our company, our idea is that every time we have a problem, we try to solve it first for our project, and then to see how we can act to make sure that this problem is not happening again. That's part of our agile and lean methodology to create successful projects. And in this methodology, we are trying to create as much content as possible to contribute to the community and to have high quality content on our blog about everything that can be related to React Native, from adding icons to your application to installing native module. So it really depends, but I would recommend going on our website. It's bame.tech, and you can see that we have quite a few blog articles, and you can also go on our GitHub, github.com/bamelab, BAMLAB. We open source stuff that we are doing the best that we can.
Very cool. I'm checking it out right now. It looks like you all have quite a bit of open source stuff there.
Yes, and I think the generator is getting now more stars than React Native image resizer. Oh yeah, that's not me that is maintaining the generator for bootstrapping application. So just wait for a few days. I will be back in the first place. And we do have also something that is a React Native component to have a header on the top of the page, and then when you scroll down, the header is getting tinier. And we used it in an application which is an hybrid application with native pages and React Native pages. And the thing is that there was already this kind of dynamic header in the native application, and the result with the new React Native header is even better than what we had before. So the thing is that if you are doing a component like this, which is properly done, you can have a result that is even better than what you can do using native components. So that's quite nice. And it's called React Native Image Header Scroll View.
Okay, great. All right. I think with that, we'll go ahead and get to the picks. Peter, do you have any picks?
It's a pick and an announcement. So moving forward, all the modules that Orchard will be releasing, including some of our older, easier ones, are going to be written in Reason 3. That includes the React Native face pile, the name list, potentially even the EXP deploy CLI that I wrote. But we'll see. So I just wanted to kind of publicize that now that we're jumping in ahead first.
Awesome. Again, any picks?
Absolutely. Today, I am releasing a library called Solidarity. You can find it on GitHub, infantred/solidarity. If by the time this podcast comes out, you haven't already seen this, I didn't do a good job. No. None of the other people here did a good job in helping promote it. There, I'm putting it on you, Nader and Peter. So it's really simple. It's basically in React Native or in these complex tool chains, we get the works on my machine kind of issue. And then when you're working with a team or a client, it tends to get a little bit more mucky and complicated. So it's been years now working with the same problem. Decided with a couple of team members it's time we finally figure out a way to stop it. And that's what this does. So you can add it to your project for no cost and then help you kind of check your environment against others pretty easily. So it's called Solidarity. That's the NPM module, and it's up on GitHub, 100% open source. If you haven't seen it yet and you're hearing this podcast, go check it out.
All right. Florian, do you have any picks?
I would say that first, if you want to create a React Native application and that you're based in Paris, just give us a call, of course. And apart from React Native, I'm also working on gdevelop. It's an open source game creator, and so you can check it out. It's open source. It's on GitHub, and it's called gdevelop. It's made in react.js. And it's creating games that are fully HTML5 compatible, and you can run it on mobile. And so if you're interested in creating games without programming, because it's based on visual programming, just give it a try.
That animated GIF is amazing, by the way, and take a look at gdevelop. Looks really good.
Yeah, the current version was built using native technologies, so it's available for Windows, Linux, and macOS. And right now, I'm porting it to React so that you can access it as a web application. And in fact, it's the version 5 of gdevelop, and it's already available. So if you browse the website, you can see that there is a try it online button. So what I've done is that the native application that is existing, it's written in C++ because I've started it years ago. And what I've done is to use mscripton to cross-compile the. So gdevelop gdevelop is a game creator that is a native application, but I'm porting it to a web application using React. And what I've done is that I've cross-compiled the core C++ classes from the native application to JavaScript using mscripton. So you can go on the website of gdevelop and try the online version, and in fact it's running the same code base as the native application. So your game can be run directly from the web app, and you can create game without programming, as it's the goal of the software, directly from the web app. So yeah, give it a try.
All right. So I guess my picks are, the first one is an article. I think it's about a month and a half or 2 months old. It's called How We Built Our React Native App, and it's written by Siddharth Jain, I believe is his name. And it's a really good, comprehensive, end-to-end kind of checklist almost of kind of things you might use in a real-world React Native app. And I think the most value that I've gotten from it and that other people have is kind of the part that goes over the testing, the deployment, and things like that using Fastlane and Jenkins and Jest. And I think they do a pretty good job of talking about all this stuff. And this seems to be like one of the most requested pieces of information, I guess, when I'm working with companies that they kind of haven't been able to find. But overall, I think in general, it's just a really good article. My other pick is going to be React Native training. We're doing a lot of boot camps 2018. We've released Denver, San Francisco, and New York for the first few months. So if you're looking for a boot camp to attend, or if you know anyone that is, I'd appreciate you checking us out. If your company needs any training, we also do that on-site training as well. All right, Florian, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and joining us all the way from Paris.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, that wraps up episode 80 of React Native Radio. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.